right, so three main subjects in the salary negotiation bucket, as I'm calling it. One of them, and I don't know the situation of everyone here, but I'm really grateful that the Fellowship Career Network was formed. So thank you, Todd and Kevin, for putting this together. This is an awesome forum and a great resource for people out there looking. It's pretty wonderful to see the amount of people that are coming together, helping one another out during this time of need, and just happy to be part of it. But so in salary negotiation bucket, I would say there's working and wanting to ask for a raise. So I don't know if anyone here is in that situation. I'm certain that there are people who have been in that situation. Not working, but you have multiple offers and you're trying to negotiate the best offer. Or not working and looking to negotiate a single offer. So the not working and having multiple offers, that very recently happened to a candidate of mine. And I can tell you that it during this period of time is quite interesting to have those kinds of conversations. So I don't know if anyone here has been in that scenario, but during this period of COVID, I would say it's kind of fun to see who's in the catbird seat when you do have that situation come up. And it was fun to witness that the candidate happened to be in a little bit more control than I would have anticipated. So that was fun. But we're going to focus on just negotiation as a whole. But if anyone wants to come back to specifics on any of these three, feel free at any point in time to raise your hand or have me backtrack. I'm happy to do that. No matter which of those you fall into, all of them require you to be mindful of some of the overarching rules, as I call them, when it comes to salary negotiation. The very first one is knowing your value. And we'll do a deep dive on each one of these, but knowing your value is obviously key, and doing research on how you are going to present what that value is also key. Secondly, you have to have a number in mind. It should go without saying, but unfortunately it doesn't. I've been doing this for, as Kevin alluded to the fact earlier, I started my company 18 years ago, but I've been in the industry for 21 years. And it's interesting how often people do not have a specific number in mind. And it's certainly helpful when you're looking to negotiate a salary to have that. Do your research and be prepared with talking points. You must have a point at which you would be happiest versus that which is, I would accept that. Be humble and polite, which I don't think anyone on this Zoom call is going to struggle with, but it's interesting. And Kevin's got a little smirk. There's certainly plenty of times in our world where people aren't humble or polite. Timing is everything. So I'll back up to that one. Timing is everything, really, when you're talking about a salary negotiation, whether it's any of those three buckets. It's critical to know your audience and know the timing of having those conversations. And certainly when you're in the third bucket, when you're looking at one offer, that tends to happen pretty early in the process versus late. So let's dive into each one of these. Knowing your value and knowing how to articulate that value. So these are some points that I put up here, and there's certainly countless others. But when you're able to articulate specific reasons as to why you deserve what you're asking for, these are some of the things that come to mind. If you save the company money, or your former employer, if again it's a first-time negotiation or a first-time conversation with a prospective employer, you increased revenue, you helped build a high-producing team, or you've been consistently recognized as a high performer. Again, there's plenty others, but these are four that typically come to mind and certainly are quantifiable. So, just taking the very first one, you save the company money. You need to have concrete numbers. I highly recommend anytime you're going into a negotiation that you're going to have concrete numbers and be able to explain where the company was versus where they were as a result of your efforts. being able to articulate specific projects that you worked on in order to save those dollars or in order to increase that revenue, or if you were hired to produce that high producing team or bring about that high producing team, what it looked like prior to you getting there versus what it looked like after. All of those things, especially in that third bucket, are going to be critical. Having a number in mind. Again, this is one that I would say is one that oftentimes gets overlooked. Giving a range is not something that I would suggest, and I don't suggest to people that they do that. When you give a range, I mean, I think everyone on this call probably knows if someone tells you they're selling something for between $50 and $100, the only number you heard was 50. If you're the buyer, the only number the seller hears is 100. So it's better and it's wiser and certainly in your best interest to have a hard and fast number in your mind. They focus solely on the low end, you focus solely on the high end when you give a range. Talking to recruiters or market experts about, what the salary should be for someone who does what you do. I had a conversation with someone today who was going from Honeywell to a startup. And he said, they're looking to pay $65,000. I'm used to making $140,000. I said, well, they're a startup. They're not Honeywell, first and foremost. So there could be other factors at play there, but 65, doing what he does in the open market, is probably a reasonable number. Given the fact that he had 19 years at Honeywell, though, that certainly does play into the fact that he had a higher income there than he might get on the open market, and certainly within a startup. Asking your peers where they go for their insight into market or salary data. That's something that I think is very often overlooked. People don't like talking about their salary or their income, but we're in unique times. And people need to get comfortable talking about things that maybe used to make them uncomfortable. That's why I love the sign behind Kevin, always do what you're afraid to do. Asking a friend, hey, can you find out what someone who does what I do makes in your company? That's a fair question. And a lot of times people will do it. A lot of times they won't. Sometimes they might not. But you can't rely on one piece of research. You can't just say, because I made it here, I should make it everywhere else I go. That's just not, unfortunately, that's not a good reason to have that number in your head. You need to do a little bit more research and have a little bit more backing you up when you propose, the dollar amount that you're proposing. Does anyone have any questions on that slide before I move on? So there's certainly more depth there. Okay. And I can't see questions anyway, Kevin. You're going to have to let me know if there's questions.
Yeah, I threw one out there. I've got a couple, but I threw one out there and I said, per your last slide on the value, when, in your opinion, when is it most important to discuss the stories that support the value?
So I would say throughout the entire interview process, anytime you can pepper in the value that you brought. So if, let's say I'm interviewing for a supply chain role and they say, the challenge that we're having right now is we have too many vendors who are in control. We can't do buybacks or whatever the case may be. When you're threading in that very specific stories, when you can say, well, not only do I have that experience, but let me reference a specific example of that experience, then you're already leading up to that negotiation phase. Because it's going to come up, and when you can go back and talk about something that you already shared with them about how you save the company money or how you decrease the vendor involvement, or we're able to get a vendor more aligned with the overall goals. That's a huge thing to use when you go to that point in time, which obviously is inevitable where you're talking about income. So value and all of those sorts of things come up early on in the process. Don't wait until you're negotiating to bring those things up. That answer that, Kevin?
It did. I appreciate that. I just
Okay.
think, very good points, because I think so many people think you sell it once in an interview, but and then they don't speak about it again. So I think that was well put. Appreciate it.
Cool. You got it. Are there more questions there?
I had a question. This is Jerry. I actually don't have anyone I can ask within my company for what I do, but we had it because I've always been a manager actually, so I always had people below me. But we had a situation where the employees, all started comparing salaries between each other. And so you mentioned a while ago to ask a friend what somebody makes at their level. Is there rules about asking within the company? And I'm not saying I'm experienced enough to handle that situation properly, but we had an issue. Our issue was that someone's salary was confidential.
Sure. Yeah, I would say I don't know your company, and I don't know if you have a human resources department, but I would say that probably the easiest way around that is to say, what market research do they do to arrive at their numbers? So if you go to HR and say, is there some compendium that we use? Is there market data that you use within HR to arrive at the numbers that we arrive at? Either for new hires, because I use this example all the time. How many times do you see, a Verizon commercial or, any commercial for a large global company that says this offer is valid for new customers only? A lot of new hires get hired above what people who have been there for 5-10 years make. We all know that exists. We all know that happens. So the market data that HR is using changes. They'll go out to market. They'll talk to recruiters. I get these kinds of phone calls all the time. What should I be paying somebody who's a project manager with this skill set? Well, tell me a little bit more. What are you looking to have them do? Are they managing a team of people? There's a whole bunch of things that go into that, arriving at a number. But your HR department, again, Jerry, I don't know if you have one, but if you do, chances are pretty good they've done some market research or market analysis.
We have an HR department, but it's horrible.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, that's a thing.
I know more about it than they did. So,
but I would lean on them to the degree that you think they might be able to help you. So,
like I said, I'm in a unique position. I was actually bringing it up because you made the statement about ask your friend, and I just had this experience that I was actually the person setting the salaries and making the decisions of who got paid what. And new guys were coming in getting paid equal to the guys that had years of experience, but it was based on performance and taking a chance that the new guy was going to do something. So anyway, yeah, I was actually the one making the decision who got what. But now I find myself in a different, that I need to pressure for myself. Now I don't have anybody else. My position's so unique. There's nothing to compare it to. So
yeah. I think like your slide isn't saying, to ask people what they make. It's to really ask your peers, where do they go for insights into market and their salary data? Yeah. So it's kind of saying like, what do you use to kind of come up with your number? Is that what you're saying, Alan?
It is. It absolutely is. Yeah. And that's why I say HR may have data that they lean on, that they use. And yeah, I don't know who you work for, Jerry, but maybe what you ought to do is reach out to competitors, and ask some of the competitors within your space. What's that?
Competitors. We don't have any competitors.
Okay. And oftentimes I don't have the answer. So I'll go with that one.
I'm gonna throw something in there. I think that one of the things that I like to do, and if you're a hiring manager, Jerry, one of the things that you can do, depending, is look at salary guides. There's various agencies or companies, large national, staffing companies. They'll put together a salary guide for certain verticals and areas of expertise. And, Alan and I both worked at Robert Half, and they publish a salary guide, which has, salaries. They may vary a bit, but at least it'll kind of give you some guidance. So catch up with me offline, and maybe I can help direct you to one or two that may be able to that you can reference.
Yeah, and me too, Jerry. I want to offer that out as well. I mean, to anybody on this call, but certainly, Jerry, reach out to me as well. I mean, you say you're doing things that not everybody else does, you know, and it's a very unique scenario. I love those. I mean, I love to help people untangle that and figure out exactly where your market value is and what you should be making.
Personally, that's I've always been a humble person and took the delayed gratification route, and now it's coming back to not be in my favor.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think you're not alone in that. You're not alone in that, which is exactly why I think this phone call, this Zoom presentation is critical right now, because your next move, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't allow that to happen.
Yeah.
You know, recognizing it is more than half the battle in this situation. So we'll get you to a point where that doesn't happen the next time that you're hired somewhere.
Yeah.
Let me know, Kevin, if there's more, and Jerry, please do reach out to me. Like I said, I'm annoyingly on LinkedIn these days, so I'm easy to find. Do your research and be prepared with talking points. So here's where some of it is. You know, here's where some of those conversation points come up, Jerry. Tone, you're fair but firm. You know, inflexible or unlikable. You know, those are not things that we're looking for. The inflexibility, unlikableness are you know, commonplace, unfortunately. But when you're doing a salary negotiation, you can't do that. And then, you know, practicing specific questions. You know, when somebody says, "What do you need to make?" You have to be ready for that question. You know, that's not a question that you can't be prepared to answer with very specific talking points. So we talked about this earlier in that second slide or third slide. You must have a point at which you would be happiest versus that which you will accept. And this is the point. You know, one of the topics that I wanted to bring up when we got to this slide is, you know, is there specific leverage that you have that you may not have known when you applied for the job, but you learned through the interview process? And by that, I mean, you know, it could very well be, you know, something related to what you just said, Jerry. You know, if during the interview process you learned that they were looking for a skill set that they didn't advertise they were looking for, but the interviewer said, "Hey, we're really struggling in this area, and it would be nice, you know, for you to ultimately hire someone to take that, you know, to fill that skill gap that we have." And you just sit there and nod your head and, you know, go through the motions, and then you get to the very end and say, "Hey, Kevin, we didn't talk about this, you know, early on in the process, but you mentioned that you were looking to hire someone who has this background and experience. Well, truth be told, I did that at my last company. So I don't really think, you know, depending on how difficult a challenge that is, I'm not sure we're going to need to hire somebody. I think I could probably take a look at that and get that solved either with people that I know or do it myself." That would be some of the hidden leverage that you can gather as you're going through the interview process. And then, you know, to Kevin's point earlier, constantly reminding them of your value. So I can't emphasize enough, when you're going through the interview process, always reference stories, always bring up stories, and, you know, how you had that impact or how you solved that problem, or, you know, how you went through a hiring spree, but then managed to get through, you know, a downturn in the economy or whatever, by, you know, correctly hiring or correctly leveraging the people that you had in order to manage your way through that. Those are talking points that should come up often to make it a whole lot easier once you get to the negotiation. Be humble and polite. So remember that very few people in the world are really comfortable having these conversations. I've been doing it for 21 years, so it doesn't bother me at all. Most people have not. Most people, you know, are not having these conversations on a daily basis. You know, when they get to the number part, even I've even had people say, "Okay, this is the worst part of the conversation. Now we're going to talk numbers." Know that that's a thing, and be okay with the fact that you're a little on edge. you're a little stressed out. Embrace that. Pray before you go in, knowing that you're going to have this conversation, and just pray for the strength and the guidance to get through this, and to hold your ground, because chances are really good that when you hold your ground, you're going to get what you ask for. It's when you're being petty, which is that next bullet point there. You don't need to come across as greedy, and you certainly don't want to sound petty. So there's sometimes a fine line, between knowing what you're worth and being able to say it with confidence, and sounding like you're greedy. But with practice and being able to do it in a polite and humble way, it's not going to come across as either one of those things. It just won't. And especially if you threaded your value through every conversation that you've had up until this point. And then that last comment that I had on there was timing is everything. This is a very, very, very difficult time to be negotiating salary. I could do it with all of you because we're face to face, but if you're trying to do it over the phone, or if you're not, making eye contact with a person, it makes it, it makes it a challenge. And, I would say that, if you're able to do it via Zoom, or if you're able to do it in person, it's even tough. Right now doing it in person, I was part of a face-to-face interview a couple weeks ago, and we got to that part where they asked the candidate, I was in the room, and they asked the candidate, how much he was expecting, which they already knew from me, but we're all wearing masks. And it was tough to read body language. It was tough to know if there was an inflection in the smile, or if the hiring manager was getting disgruntled or upset by the numbers that my candidate was throwing out. So I would almost suggest doing a Zoom, because at least with a Zoom call, you're not wearing a mask, and you can read the body language a little bit better, and you can know whether or not they're nodding in agreement or seem to be pushing away from the table. So try to do it that way if you can. And again, it's difficult to know how it's going to be presented, when that question of what do you need to make is going to come up when you're in these conversations. But, try to time it so that you're at the best possible face-to-face and body language moment. Are there any other questions, Kevin, before I move on to the next slide? Okay.
There's some conversation that I think it's not so much a question, but just talking about when you were talking about being able to share your value, and just the idea of being able to share that through stories about the value you've done, really more than making it a sales pitch and talking about yourself all the time.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you wanted to comment a little bit more about that, but
certainly. Yeah. So I would say it comes up in the questions. I would say ordinarily in an interview, they're going to ask you for, tell me about a time when, and you do. That's a great point, Todd. I would say there's speaking with, quiet confidence, and they're speaking with, I was able to accomplish this. And you definitely want to say, I was able to accomplish this sometimes. And then you also want to pepper in we did this as a team. But you don't want to shy away from saying what you did independently, solely accomplish. Don't shy away from that stuff. When it was a team effort, when it was something that was accomplished as a group, say those things for sure. But when it was you that had the idea and you that delivered on that idea, take credit. We're talking a very difficult time where a lot of people are out there looking for work, and you need to tout your skill. You need to tout your ability in a non-egotistical way, in a very humble way. And it's going to come across that way if done right, which is, part of, I don't know if I have that slide coming up. I already told Kevin I'm not a slide guy, so hopefully this is working. But, it's great to, practice with friends. We can almost all on this phone call project what questions are going to be asked during an interview. I mean, Jerry, you've conducted, a lot of interviews yourself. So the questions you ask, and they're not that different than the questions you're going to be asked when you're interviewing with someone else. So that, there's varieties of them, but for the most part, all the questions that interviewers ask are going to be relatively close to the same. So practice your answers. So to your point, Todd, just back to what you said, you don't need to answer every single one with a story. Just know which ones you're going to answer with a story and have the story prepared.
Yeah. I was thinking about your statement about leveraging what you find in the interview. And I know that, a lot of the work I was doing in my past, where not so much in the interviewing process, but in working with customers, where we're basically, trying to, get them on board with something. It's still a negotiation of sorts. What we would spend a lot of time doing was asking. And I think people in interviews, a lot of times they'll ask, the things they want to know rather than about the company and about the team. And, asking more of those kinds of questions often lets you then tie your experience back into what you're bringing to the table, into their need better.
Yep.
Because you know more about them, and it shows that you have a natural curiosity about what they're experiencing, as opposed to just being sort of about yourself too. So kind of combining those two things, I didn't know if that was something that what your thought would be about something like that.
Most definitely. Yeah. I would say the number one question that I tell people to ask when it's their turn to ask a question, like we all know how interviews are structured, or typical interviews are structured. It's sit under the hot light while I fire questions at you, and then at the very end of that, I'll turn the light off and say, so do you have any questions for me? The very first question I tell people to ask is, what does success look like in this role? What does success look like in this job? What does success look like for you in this company? Though a variation of that question gets you exactly where you just said, because then you can tie that right back to what success has looked like for you. Right. So you're telling me this is what success looks like in this company. Now let me tell you how I brought that in my previous roles.
Right.
That's good. The other thing I would throw in there, on top of that, is the stories and that question, and focus on how you solve the pain. That's, I think, the $1 million question, is finding out what challenges and what's the biggest pain point a company has, right? And then tying those stories, as Alan has shared, and et cetera, tying those stories directly to that pain. It's not just telling a story and the value, but also it's tying that directly to the pain that they find, because you could tell a story that shows the value, which is good. But if you can tell a story that says, this is how I've solved your pain in the past, and the biggest challenge you're having in the past, that you're going to have to go pay, that you might pay thousands of dollars to buy software, or you might pay a high dollar consultant to come in and solve that. If I've solved that somewhere else, then your value just significantly rises.
Yep. Yeah. And the only pitfall there, Kevin, and you and I both know this too, is when you're asked a specific question, give a specific answer. Like oftentimes, I'm sure all of us have heard you're overqualified for the job. Mm-hmm. When someone says you're overqualified for the job, chances could be that you answered a question that could have been answered in a minute, and you spent 6 minutes answering it. And what I mean by that is you go on about, not only have I saved $100 million for a company, but I saved, Honeywell $2.2 billion. Well, then they're suddenly looking at it, or let's say that, let's say the numbers are a little bit different. Let's say, we're looking to, trim our vendors so that we can save $500,000. And you worked at a company where you trimmed the vendors and you saved $2.6 million. They look at that and go, you're going to get bored here. That we're not looking at that scale. You're probably going to end up getting bored here because we're a much smaller organization than that. Mm-hmm. So you just need to be cautious of that. Don't tell your stories in this fashion when you're talking to a company that's this size. If that makes sense.
Good points.
Know what levers could be pulled for you to be happy. So this is another, I don't know that it's necessarily salary negotiation, but it's certainly offer negotiation. This would be flex time. This would be promotions. This would be, leave, vacation time, anything like that. So have those thoughts in your mind as well, because if you sit down for a negotiation and you're targeting 150,000 a year and they offer you 130 with all the flex time you need, all the vacation time you need, and a promotion that should happen within the next 18 months, that could change that number. So just have those thoughts in your head as to what else could be part of that offer in order to make that 150 realized, even if it's not cash. And you should be prepared for what you'll do if that minimum is not met. So if you're having a conversation and they say 130 and you were targeting 150, okay, then what? What do you say? What does that conversation look like at that point in time? Do you push a chair away from the table and walk out of the office? Or, are there things that you could do? I would contend that there are things that you can do. One of them is when you propose 150 and they come back with 130, instead of saying, what I'm looking for is 150, if you see they shudder, they're just kind of like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. Just ask them. That seems to have shaken you a little bit. What were you thinking? What did you have in mind? And then keep that conversation going. I mean, that's part of the negotiation process. Is you don't want to immediately get into offer counteroffer. You want to flush out, to Kevin's point, flush out what those pain points are. What are some of the things? It could be something that's completely immovable. And you're not going to get to the 150, or it could be something that is movable and you just need to talk through it in order to get to that point. So when you say, when I look at Todd and I say, okay, Todd, I'm looking for 150,000, and Todd shudders, I can say that number seems to have surprised you a little bit, Todd. Can you tell me more about that? And then Todd will say, well, no one on our team makes 150, including me. I've witnessed those conversations happening. So then at that point you say, okay, well, if the person who's hiring me doesn't make 150, am I being unreasonable? Or is this the wrong place for me to be if the person I'm going to be working for isn't making what I currently make, or even less than I currently make? Is this a place that I should even have on my target list? Or you could say, if it's internal equity, are people reviewing internal salaries right now? I mean, is that happening as we speak? Because that seems like on the open market, a lot of your team, including yourself, could possibly make a little bit more. So is that something that is being reviewed? I mean, do you feel as though the organization as a whole is reviewing the salaries of the employees here? Again, just keeps that conversation going. And Todd says, no, I don't think we are. We're not looking at that at all. Okay. Well, then you have, again, another decision tree facing you. Do I continue to move forward, or do I back away and say this is the wrong place? Or do I look at all those other things, all those other levers that could be pulled? It could be, internal equity, like I was saying, or salary caps. I mean, there could be salary caps within the organization as well. And this is one point that I definitely wanted to make as well, because I had this happen the other day. Negotiate everything all at once, not individually. So if you are given an offer, I'll just use the example that I had the other day. The person initially was told the role was going to pay 55,000. He said, actually, I'm targeting 65. Now, within 2 seconds, they said, okay, we can meet 65. Now, everyone on this call would probably have the same thought he had, which is, dang it, I should have asked for more, because that was too fast. So there was more in the kitty. Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. I don't know. But then 2 days later, when he accepted the offer, he said, Alan, do you think it's okay if I go back and negotiate for more vacation time? I said, no, it's not. It is okay to negotiate everything all at once. Once you start, tic tac, it's difficult. Once you've negotiated the salary, you want to negotiate all of it all at once, in my personal opinion. Now, I've seen it work where people can go back and get a little tic tac. It's just not good form, in my opinion. Be ready to talk through everything that was on that offer versus just one item.
I'll tell you, that's extraordinarily frustrating to recruiters and hiring managers. One of the last people I hired at Dell did that about 3 times. And I finally got to the place where I'm like, do you want this job or not?
Yeah.
Because I'm done. And so, yeah, that's totally bad form.
It's very bad form, and it happens, it's, and you can flesh that out as well by saying, I haven't seen a complete offer yet. So once I see a complete offer, I'll be able to tell you my answer. So if, he was initially thrown 55 and then he said, what about 65? They said, okay. He probably could have approached that slightly differently and said, I'd rather see a complete offer before I worry too much about the salary. And then we could have looked at the complete offer, maybe gone in at 70 or 75 and possibly more flex time. But we can't go back and negotiate in a ticky-tack way after that number is thrown out. And he said, yes, I would accept it, 65. Any other points or comments on that? So who has the upper hand? I mean, that obviously matters in a negotiation. It just does. And right now I would say, if you are not prepared, and that's a big thing. If you are not prepared, the employer could feel as though they have more leverage, given the market, given the amount of people that are out there looking. If you are prepared, they won't. The better prepared you are, the more leverage you automatically have in a negotiation conversation. Any given day, I would take a prepared person over somebody who thinks they have leverage and doesn't. So prepare yourself, do your research, know what the market bears, know your value and what you bring to the organization. And you will walk in there with a lot more leverage than your competitors who are looking for that job as well. And this gets back to the 150 versus 130. Ultimately, most important, that the path you are choosing leads you where you want to go. So if it's just about the salary, then the 150, 130 scenario is probably not the correct path. You got to keep looking. But if it's, if you can look at all the opportunity that the company has, or all the other benefits, or, any sort of upside potential that they might have, it could be a different scenario for you. Any questions at this point?
There's quite a few people that have been making some other comments. I think Walter and John, I don't know if you guys want to chime in.
I have a question. I've noticed that just applying for a job, they ask right on the very first screen, what rate you're looking for. And you haven't even interviewed for it. You don't have any idea what they are expecting vacation-wise or flex time or whatever you're interested in besides the salary. So what do you recommend in that case?
Sure. So I always recommend people put down what they most recently made. That is a good starting point. Now, if the job description, let's say you're either stretching or you're saying, right now I need a job, which a lot of people are in both of those scenarios right now. A lot of people are saying, I'm going to be opportunistic. I'm going to look for an opportunity while I'm still employed, and I'm going to try to stretch. And a lot of people are saying, I just need an income today. I have not seen where it's, if you have the skills, if you have at least the base of what they're looking for, I don't think you're going to be that far off oftentimes, maybe within a few percentage points if you say what you most recently made. If you are going backwards, then you're probably going to be off. And in that scenario, I would say still put it, but do your level best to try to put negotiable if the box allows negotiable. Try to connect with a recruiter. Try to connect with somebody inside the organization. You know, so when you've applied and you know you're going, you know, a little bit downstream of what you are capable of, still put the number of what you most recently made, but try your hardest to try to get in a negotiation with somebody right out of the gate and say, look, I have skills here. You're looking for somebody here. I'm looking for an opportunity and I'd love to grow with your organization. So if you have to put me somewhere in the middle, or if you have to put me here, at that point in time, Dawn, you and I get on the phone and we talk through it. Because that's where you can negotiate things that might benefit them from not having to hire another person because you have that skill set.
Okay,
and
thanks.
you can leverage a higher income as a result.
Yeah, I'll throw in a couple of comments on or comment on that, Alan. That's great words. So at Whole Foods, for example, when we post a job, right, we have a salary range. And if we see salaries come in, and I see this all the time. I'll see a salary come in that's $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 more than the salary that we know we have. We have kind of a trigger because we have other variables in salaries. We have bonus and we have a couple other things. I may go $20,000, $25,000 above what my salary range is and say, hey, we'll be willing to talk to these folks to understand what their story is. Because I think everybody has a story with what a number is. And we take a very personal approach. So we'll investigate that. But if it's, 25, 30,000 above, the likelihood is, even if that is an all-inclusive number, we're probably not even going to be there or get there. So we may, we have to manage our time wisely. So we'll decline folks because of that. So as you're looking at salaries, I go back to previous sessions about networking. And as Alan talked about, asking people and finding information out, do your due diligence before you actually have to put that number. If you have to put a number, negotiables, a great thing to put. But if you have to put a number, do your homework before you do that. And then when you put it, hopefully you're within the framework of what a company would be willing to entertain you on.
Yep. Does that help, Dawn?
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Alan.
Welcome. And then I also, this book, Never Split the Difference, by a guy named Chris Voss, for any negotiation, period, is an amazing read. It's an absolutely amazing read. So if you haven't read that book and you want to learn a little bit more about, the subtitle is Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It. It's a great book. It does have some tips in there specific to salary negotiation, but it's a great read for sure.
What was the title of the book again?
It is called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. Oh, it's got a sunshine thing on it there.
I just added a link to it on Amazon for folks if you want to
Excellent.
check it out.
Thanks.
The other thing, Alan, another comment that came up in the chat was about recruiters or companies, but it was specific to recruiters, getting you comfortable, right? Making you feel really comfortable and then slipping in that salary question. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, again, I think a prepared person is going to do okay. So that question is going to come, whether you're comfortable or uncomfortable, the question is coming. So preparing yourself for the question, period, is the first step, I would say, in answering it in a way that gives you the leverage. So knowing that question will come up, knowing that comment will happen, just be ready for it. It's there's never been a person that started at a company that didn't have this conversation. It's never happened. So it's happening and it's going to come. So just have that number in mind. I would say also, I hear a lot, and you guys have probably all heard it as well. He who speaks first loses. When you throw out the number first, you feel as though you might have lost the conversation versus saying, well, what does this position pay? There's a limit to that. I would say that if you're asked twice, just say your number.
Mm-hmm.
You can't dodge that question too many times and still have the interest of the person who's looking to pay you whatever that number is. Kevin, do you agree with that? Or Todd, do you agree with that? I mean, I think it gets touchy when you ask too many times and people still don't answer.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a hiring leader, and I know Jared, I know we have a number of hiring leaders on here, but I get frustrated when you ask that question twice and they still dodge it. I can respect the fact that they don't want to, right? They may not want to set themselves up or undervalue them or overvalue themselves. But I think an honest, and you can find the personality by how they're going to address that answer, right? When you actually say it. But if you do get asked twice, absolutely, I think you need to say the number. And that also sets the tone of how, when you're asked a tough question inside the company, how do you deal with it?
Yeah.
It kind of can set a path in motion there.
For sure.
How do you guys react to if you say what salary are you looking for, and the candidate says, well, I know there's a budget for this position, can you give me an idea of the range?
Yep, I'm totally fine with that.
Okay.
I'm 100% on board with that. So I would say, in response to that, typically what I will do is I will give them the budget and I will say, how does that translate to what you've made? So I will counter. I will still try to get to your number because I want to know if you're going up or if you're going down, and I want to know why. That's really what I'm digging for, is why do you consider yourself worthy of the raise, or why is it that you're willing to take 25,000 less? And again, if you're in either one of those scenarios, be prepared to answer that question, because I would say I'm not alone at all in the fact that I'm going to ask that question next.
Yeah, I would say, I was always able, pretty much after interviewing somebody, to know where they kind of fit in our ranges, regardless of what they thought, they might think very highly of themselves, but you kind of know, like, hey, here's where your skill level is, here's where your experience is relative to the people I already have on this team that are already doing the job and are highly successful at it, right? And so, you do have to. I like what you said the most, Alan, is just really being prepared. Go and do the research that lets you have a solid answer relative to what you're going for.
Yeah. And more than one data point.
Yeah.
Again, more than one data point.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah. Lots of different companies pay very different for the same position because of who they are, what their salary and pay approach is and methodology. So yeah, do your homework and get a wider range. The other thing I would say, to Alan's point, there is, at least in Texas, I think it is national law that companies cannot ask you what you made. Now, recruiting companies can, because recruiting companies or staffing companies are not hiring you. But internally in the HR department, we can no longer ask folks what they're making. We can ask what you're targeting and what you're looking for, but not what you're making in the past. Now, I do like what Alan says about putting down maybe what you've made in the past in your target, or if you have a reason why you're asking something slightly different, you can put that number down. But pick that number, like Todd said and Alan said. Do your research. Have a number in mind when you go to the negotiating table. It's even better to have the conversations early in the process, or if it's not brought up to you, maybe you bring it up, because the last thing you want to do is you want to go through all this time and get to the very end only for the company to say, oh, what are you looking for? What's that target? And the number you put down was well above what their target was. And they're going to come in with an offer that's significantly lower than what you're looking for. Then you've wasted tons of time. So I think knowing it early in the process of how you line up, then you can tell your story You can figure out if that works for you. If their salary is lower than what your target is, you can go back to your, your family, have the discussions, look at everything on paper and say, hey, I might be willing to take more flex time, or, if their medical costs are lower, your net. So look at the whole package, but at least you can look at that earlier and start to have that thought in your mind. What are you willing to trade off for it if you are? So, and I'll tell you, as a hiring leader, I love it when a candidate will ask me that early on and we'll have that discussion. I always bring it up, but I love when a candidate brings it up, because that tells me that they're valuing my time and they don't want to waste my time only to get to the end.
What question specifically, Kevin?
What
question do you value that they ask?
Just if it doesn't come up, ask them what their budget is. Ask them what their salary range is. Say, hey, I'm curious. I don't want to waste your time. I just like to know, do you have a specific target range that you're looking for this role? If it doesn't get brought up by them, you got to be ready to talk about it, but you can bring it up in that first conversation and preface it that you don't want to waste their time. You just want to make sure that you're aligned. And that also will give you an opportunity to tell your story. I don't know. What are your thoughts to that, Alan?
I like that. Yeah, I like that as well. I would say it's, oftentimes we have it listed in the job description, so you know what you're applying to. But we bring it up as recruiters. We bring it up so early in the process that it's rare that somebody has to say it. But I would say if you're talking to the company specifically, yes. Let's say you're going through the process and talking to recruiting coordinators and whatnot, I would definitely suggest that you do that pretty early on as well.
Yeah.
What's budgeted for the role, or what are you looking, budget wise for this? It's a good question to flesh out early, for sure.
It's we got about 20 more minutes.
I have a breakout if you want me to do that. I mean, we can talk through these things.
Well, I was going to say, we got 7 people besides us. So I think if you want to throw the breakout, I don't know, do you want to keep it right here, or should we break out?
I'm happy to keep it right here. I mean,
let's just throw it out here. I think there's a few other comments too. I know John just threw something out about later years. You want to ask that, John?
Yeah. Just wondering if you've worked with people that are older that may have different priorities than salary and trying to maintain the salary trajectory they've had, and instead focus on some other types of benefits or vacation or whatever.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I would say that's a great point. I'm glad you brought it up, John, because no doubt about it. I would say people who bring a level of maturity to an organization and say, look, I want to be here. I want to be a mentor to people. I want to, help grow others like I've done throughout my career and like others have done for me. So I'm not in this for the money. I'm in it for, the ability to get in an RV and drive across the country with my wife right now and visit the grandkids or whatever. Those situations come up a lot. And I would say, again, I would advise strongly to not bring that up early, when you're at the negotiation table. And again, like I said, if somebody's 25,000 below, or, I'm just using that as a number. But if somebody's well below what they've made before, I will always ask why. Mm-hmm. Why are you okay with less? And those are good reasons. Those are valid reasons as to why.
Yeah.
Dawn, I know you had a question that might kind of fit into that bucket. Do you want to, that you were asking me about? So.
Yeah, I found a job that's full-time. It's in North Austin. It fits my job experience perfectly. Like every single thing they wanted, I've got like 20 years of experience doing every single thing. But it's full-time, and I really, really would rather have, 3-4 days a week, or lots of vacation, or be able to do some of it from home. And I had asked Todd and Kevin, is it rude to apply for this job when I really, really don't want full-time? So
no.
That was my question.
No, I don't think so at all. I think you're offering them an opportunity to get someone who has 25 years of experience. So probably, I don't know if your income expectations would be exactly what that person who doesn't have 25 years of experience would be if you have all the other benefits that you're looking for. So you're offering them we'll get the work done, and I'll probably give you some cost savings.
Yeah, honestly,
I
I don't know, I haven't interviewed for the job, but it wouldn't surprise me if I could do what, if they hired someone else that takes 5 days to do it, I literally could probably do it in 3.5 days, So, work-wise, I think I could get it done, but it just wouldn't take me 5 days a week to do it.
Yeah.
Have you thought about the idea of doing 4 10-hour days instead of 5 regular days?
Yeah, maybe.
They might be amenable.
Honestly, I don't need the money, so I'd really rather just work fewer hours.
Yeah, it's amazing how few people actually work 40 hours a week. So, I would say a company that, especially during what we're going through right now, Dawn, where people are working from home, is going to be a whole lot more accepting of your offer than 6 months ago. A whole lot more accepting.
I have a personal friend that in the medical field went through that exact situation, and she got exactly what you're asking for.
Nice.
I would just throw in there, just be honest, right? Be clear in your presentation, especially when you get on the first call. Right? The last thing you want to do is if applicants, companies get a whole slew of applicants, and they may not be able to review all applicants, but you look great and you get in a slot to get an interview, and they're not willing to entertain that. You may have just taken time from them that would be focused on somebody else. So just have that in the back of your mind. Obviously, you want to get an opportunity to pitch your situation to see if it would work. Whereas you've got the exact experience, 25 plus years, just when they reply to you, just be honest with them that, hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I think I can offer. I'd love to have a chat with you just about it, see if it would work out.
So you think I should tell them pretty soon into the process to not waste their time if they're not interested in that?
I would like to hear others' points on that, but my opinion is yes. Again, it's one of those things that be honest early. You may not get the job, but your honesty shows a bit of how you approach the situation.
Yeah, and my thinking is that you want to obviously get to the interview phase because you're not even talking to them right now, right? It's just that thing. But you don't want them to feel like you did an interview, a second interview, and then you never bring that up until the end, right? You want to say like, hey, I'm very, very excited about this. And now that I'm learning a little bit more about it, I'm even more excited. But, I'm really curious about the opportunity to work in this kind of flex capacity or whatever it is that you're looking for. Would that be something that would be good for you guys? And so that, that conversation doesn't seem like oh, she's perfect for the job. And then you're sort of bait and switching them and saying, well, no.
Right. That's why that was why I worried about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. During the application process, I wouldn't worry about that, Dawn, but in the initial interview phase, for sure, you want to bring that up. I agree with.
Absolutely.
I think personally, the way I'd approach it would be to present yourself first, show that you have the skill set to do the job, and then make sure in that first interview, though, that you say, but look, I don't want to mislead you. This is really what I'm going for. If you can provide it, that would be great. I'd love to do it for you.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. That's, I wouldn't say that the very first words out of your mouth, because then they haven't had a chance to get to know you or whether you're valuable or not. But, once they kind of go like, yeah, she's valuable, well, then say, well, hey, but one of the things I'm looking for is X, and so later in that first interview, but in that first interview.
And when you go into that interview, just again, it's all about what Todd and Alex said. Be prepared. Have your trade-offs, right? Know what it is, know what that value is. So if you know that you can do it in 3.5 days, or you're willing to do that, be able to show those stories where you've created efficiencies in process and save the company time, because then that only will support them to maybe think about it.
Yeah. And I would say just kind of know like how know that well, right? Like maybe for them, because Alan, you and Kevin are more knowledgeable about this, so tell me what you think. But like, there's different things where when someone's working full time, versus when they're working part time from a benefit standpoint and things like that. And so, maybe you don't care about benefits. Maybe you've got that covered already, right? But in their mind, they're saying, well, hey, she wants to work 3.5 days and still make as much money, or she wants to work 3.5 days and we'd still have to pay her benefits. And like, we can't do that if we're only having her work 3.5 days, but you may not really be asking for that. And so to be able to kind of have that conversation and be clear about what you really do need and want, because you might take other things off the table that let them say yes, right? But in their mind, if you're not clear enough about it, they might think, no, we can't do that because that would break our part-time, full-time kind of model or whatever for benefits, right? So just really having the whole thing worked out in your mind to have that kind of conversation.
Agreed. Alan, if you have some additional thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, I'd love for you to just review what you put up on the breakout slide. I think there's some good info there.
Sure. Yeah. So either one, Dawn, is that helpful? I mean, did you get what you were looking for in that?
Yeah, that's really helpful. I was just afraid to waste their time when they were looking for someone full time. But to like Kevin and Todd said, as long as I bring it up late in the first interview, I've only wasted an hour of their time, maybe at the most. Yeah. So, and who knows? I mean, it's a nonprofit, so like Todd mentioned, I don't even need health insurance. I already have that. So that would be a big savings on their part.
Yeah.
And so, it might make it worthwhile for them, even money wise.
Yeah. My default answer is always apply. And then everything else will work itself out when you have a conversation. So apply for the role for sure. And then get in the conversation. You're authentic, you're genuine, you're going to be honest with them, and just see where the cards fall.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So yeah, for the breakout, these are things that I just came up with based on what we just talked about. So the first one, who is currently in your circle of friends or colleagues you can rely on to help you role play, whether you're asking for a raise or you're in the scenario where you're being offered a job. People who are honest and candid can tell you if you're polite and humble, can poke holes in what you've said. Maybe somebody who has even been through it, a hiring manager or somebody who's in hiring capacity. And if you don't have any of those, find them, or maybe they are here in this forum. So that was, the first thing that I wanted everyone to just think about. Do you have those people? And if you don't, make sure you do. Make sure you get them before you're in that scenario. Have you been in a situation where you couldn't adequately articulate your value? And then what did you do? And hopefully some of these talking points helped you. But I'd love for anyone to share their stories if they have those. And then finally, I think a good number of people have been in this. Have you ever simply just not negotiated to avoid the conflict? And did this particular evening that we spent together help you think differently about the next time you find yourself in that situation? So I'd say the first one, role playing. A lot of people don't like to role play, but I just like to throw it out there. I mean, does anyone have a story or a situation where all right, John, you just raise your hand. Tell us about the situation.
It's not a specific situation. It's basically to let people know that some of the clubs around here have groups that let you go role play. And that's one of the biggest helps for me over the past year is actually working through some of the questions that you're asked in interview situations. But it could be the same for salary negotiation or whatever.
It's huge. Yeah. I mean, even if you're doing it in front of a mirror, but if you're doing it in front of a mirror, you're not getting feedback. So it's better if you have a trusted friend and somebody who can be, really, really honest with you, that you're sounding kind of greedy when you say it that way, or, I don't think I would pay you based on the way you just presented that. Any of that sort of thing. Does anyone else have another story?
Be ready to be surprised. When you're confident, when you have a number, don't short yourself. My story, I've got, I've been doing this for a long time, so I've got stories like Alan with candidates, but I also have my own personal stories. I went into an interview with the CEO of a small company, and I was thinking to myself, my wife and I had our role play. We had looked at our paper. Yeah, the other thing is pour all your thoughts down on paper, right? The value points, what am I willing to take? What am I not willing to take? What's my high number? What's my stretch number? Whatever it is, put those down on paper and take those with you. And in this situation, I had a stretch goal. I had a stretch number in mind, but I'm like, there's no way he's going to pay me that. And I went to the CEO and we had dinner and we chatted. And at the end, he's like, all right, so what are you looking to make? And I was like, I almost didn't throw my stretch number out because I didn't want to jeopardize losing the opportunity. But I had already gone in knowing that I was going to, and it was, my wife and I were okay with me not getting it. I threw my stretch number out without even a blink of an eye. He stood up and said, great, when can you start? And shook my hand. And I came home and I took my wife and she's like, wow, you didn't think that was going to happen. And the one thing I will say on that is pray about it, right? Give it up to God. Let God speak the word into you, because that's what we did. And out of it, it was like, okay, that was the number. God just said, go for it. And anyway, let him have it.
I'd like to add just a little story. It's really not so much about this, but I used to do Boy Scouting with my sons, and we, Boy Scouts, as they go from one rank to the next, they have to go through like a review. And we always wanted the young men to understand that this was kind of preparation for having to go through interviews and things like this, right? And we would train them that, we're asking them questions about what they've done over the last 6 months. But what we would tell them is, look, if you don't go back and really review that and be prepared to speak that, like, it's one thing to do something, and it's another thing to have it loaded up in your mind to articulate it immediately. And so the guys who would really do that would come in and they would just be able to answer those questions. But the other ones would be like, well, I think it was this, and and so this being prepared is writing it down, having the answer that you want. There's no stress because it's available to you. It's accessible in your memory, and you're not having to think about it on the fly. And so I think that's really that being prepared and being prepared to articulate. And role play is especially helpful for that, because you've actually already spoken it to somebody else and worked through the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
This is Walter. I have one quick comment. In the phrase adequately articulate your value, have someone record your session and listen to the tone of your voice and how you speak. That will display confidence, that you feel like you're standing on rocks. And it just helps me that I have someone role play and I hear myself respond, and you can make adjustments, will make you sound like you're really worth the quote dollars and cents that you're asking for. And when you see yourself up there, you actually say, this is how I come across to who I may be working with. It's your confidence that comes across in how you articulate your value via how you sound in that record session. You hear yourself talking, and it comes across, and you can make adjustments in how you're presenting yourself, not doing the ums and the ahs and maybe routines and storytelling.
It's great, Walter.
That's awesome, Walter. That's perfect. I agree.
I think
100%.
that's a great ending, Walter. Yeah, and the tools are out there. Zoom, I think you can start an instant meeting for yourself, and you can actually record it so you can watch and listen. A good old iPhone we all have, or phone, we all have voice recording technology on our phones.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree
Yeah,
with you.
you can do that, and that's exactly right. You don't even necessarily have to be on a Zoom meeting with somebody else. You can literally start one and record it to your computer with nobody else even being there. But and you know, I'll hop in on what Alan was talking about. You know, if you're going to have to do the Zoom thing right now, which I would agree is way better than a mask because people just, you know, you can't see people and their facial expressions. But you know, really keep in mind that to have the best and most powerful connection with people, you need to be looking at the lens at the time that you're talking, even though you might be looking at their picture on the screen when they're talking, because you know, looking at the lens is going to be looking in their eyes. So,
Great point.
Great.
Great point.
Well, anybody have any final thoughts? And if you have questions, please send them to Todd or I or Alan. Alan's contact information is will be on the follow-up. So please don't hesitate to reach out to Alan. Connect with him on LinkedIn. As we all talk about, networking is key. He's a resource. Use him, and he's a good you know, man that's following God as well. So he'll treat you right.
Alan, we sure appreciate you coming and sharing this with us. I thought it was great. I learned some things in this night just to kind of answer your question. Like, I'm like, man, there's things I learned here that are good. So thank
Right
you
on.
so much.
Yeah.
Hey, you
So-
guys are very welcome. I appreciate the invitation, and yeah, please connect with me. Anything I can do for any of y'all, let me know, please.
Awesome. So again, thank you, Alan, for coming and joining us, sharing such great information. For those in the group, remember this will be on the website under the blog section in the next few days. So keep an eye out for it. If you need to go back and reference some stuff or information, it'll be there. Please amplify as we move into next week. Amplify and share with your friends, colleagues, neighbors, your community, your family, whoever you think might need some support. Bring them along.
Yeah, we really appreciate that.
Yeah. So
Kevin, will you pray us out, man?
yeah, for sure. So let's pray it out. Bow our heads. Heavenly Father, I just thank you for such an awesome night. Lord, there's a lot of great gold nuggets that were provided tonight from Alan. We lift up Alan. We ask that you would just bless him for the time that he's shared with us and the information that you gave him, the wisdom you gave him to share with the group. Lord, allow everything that we learned to help us find the next step in our career. Help us land that next job. Help us identify, you know, closer to what our calling is. We thank you for this group. We thank you for Alan. And we go in peace this week, giving it all to him and trusting that his will be done, not ours. Focus on the spirit and not the worldly things. Lord, be with those that are impacted by COVID. Get them health. Bring them back safe. And in peace, we lift all us up in your son's name. Amen.
This is Todd Boyum, and we hope you enjoyed this presentation of Fellowship Career Network. We meet every Monday evening from 6:30 to 8 p.m., and we hope you'll join us soon. To register and receive the Zoom link in your email, simply go to fellowshipcareernetwork.com today.